Cambridge Modification Order 2021, notices for which are already up at the site itself, and there's no reference whatsoever to the town green application. And in my opinion, that indicates a gross legal deficit on the part of whoever produced this paper. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Tony, if you'd like to respond, that would be very kind.
Thank you, Chair. Did you want to just do Mr. Page's question as well?
To take the next question as well?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. This is a question from Mr. Page. Is this being read out by you, Michelle? Okay.
Unfortunately, Mr. Page can't be with us today, so has asked me to read out his question. Will all of the green space outside the proposed Shire Hall apart hotel be legally protected for use by members of the public at all times, and the operators of the hotel prohibited from cordoning off any outside green space for the use of hotel residents, guests or third-party operators?
Thank you very much, Michelle. Tony, if you'd like to respond.
Thank you, Chair. Cambridgeshire County Council issued a press release regarding Shire Hall on the 28th of June 2021, and a copy of that press release can be found on the Council's website, and a link to that will be provided in the written response. The press release reflects the proposals for the development of the Shire Hall site to provide the refurbishment and redevelopment of the Shire Hall building and surrounding properties into a modern and environmentally efficient apart hotel and offices. The primary buildings will be to BREEAM excellent standards. This will be in parallel to the improvement in environmental quality, amenity and public access to the Shire Hall site and the heritage assets located within it. Cambridgeshire County Council is fully aware of the critical importance of the heritage and amenity of the Shire Hall site to the city and the wider area, and it has been fundamental to the strategy for the site that this is not only protected but enhanced as part of any scheme. The Council has been working extensively with Brookgate to produce proposals that achieve these goals. This includes specific proposals to improve access to and heritage appreciation of the Castle Mound and associated scheduled ancient monuments, and ensuring the continuity of access across the site. The Council is aware of the Town Green application, along with the Rights of Way application submitted separately. The existence of such applications does not preclude or prevent the Council from engaging in the appropriate management of its properties or engagement with stakeholders on its proposals. Members of the public are entitled to submit such applications as they consider appropriate. The Council will follow and comply with the respective application processes. The proposals for the site itself will, if passed by members, be subject to full scrutiny through planning and related processes. This will include a wide range of environmental, archaeological and other evaluations and reports prior to any decision by the planning authority and other bodies as required. Upon completion of the scheme, if approved, the Castle Mound, the wider scheduled ancient monument, including Civil War earthworks, and wider green space on the Shire Hall site will remain under the ownership, control and management of Cambridgeshire County Council. The proposals include a potential increase in the green space and full and open access to the entire green space, including the Castle Mound. Legal advice has not been obtained in respect of limitations of the Heritage Act, as there is no such legislation. However, Council members have previously been briefed on the legal aspects of the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Act 1979. Neither Brookgate nor the Council have plans for the long-term fencing off of the Castle Mound or limiting access, nor charging entry to the site or having candy-covered awnings. Temporary limitations of access may be required during the development phase to facilitate archaeological investigations or other works on site, and will be carried out in strict accordance with all relevant legislation. A key plank of the commercial negotiations by all parties has been the retention of a high-quality public and open amenity space surrounding the proposed apart hotel and offices to provide a high-quality environment to attract customers and tourists to Cambridge and the heritage assets. The apart hotel does not have any rights to occupy or use the lawn or green space or restrict access to those areas. The detailed plans remain under discussion. However, these include proposals to remodel parts of the site to increase the area of lawn and green space by removal of currently developed areas. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Tony. That's a very helpful response. Do we have any other questions on this matter? Yes, Councillor Hull.
Chairman, sorry, do you mean with regards to what Councillor Scott said or with regards to the report in general?
The report in general.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Chairman, I have two questions. Do you wish me to say both of them or say one, stop, and then ask the second one?
If they're relatively short, let's have them both.
Okay, let's go for it. So with regards to the report, can I bring your attention to page 119, paragraph 4.8, and the last bullet point? Can I just add before we start my question that Mr. Cooper has been exceptionally helpful on this on another matter, so he understands the history of why I'm going to ask this question. With regards to the air conditioning units which will be placed on the building, and other buildings of the County Council. I'm aware that the average air conditioning unit is a 60 decibel noise, and that can sometimes and does affect neighbours. Can I ask when that will be taken into consideration in the future with regards to this building and the hotel?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, the noise features within the planning and building regulation processes, so it will be considered as part of that process and the design. And clearly, neither the council nor Brookgate wish to cause any disturbance or upset to the neighbour, and indeed noise is a statutory nuisance, so were it to be a problem, those affected could potentially bring legal action, so clearly something we're keen to make sure doesn't happen.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm especially concerned with regards to the nighttime noise or with the keeping of IT servers cool, but thank you very much indeed for that. The second point is on page 121, and it's paragraph 7.5.2. I'm just getting there myself. With the removal of the parks at the front, I think this is a more general question. Can I just ask that we got to take into consideration with removal of the car parks that cars will be parked around the area with regards to the people, the patrons using the hotel, and as been just said about the public footpaths and other access, that they too will not be able to disturb neighbours. So we can take that into consideration how that's going to be managed in the future and maybe say something to the occupiers of the hotel. Thank you, Chairman. They are my two questions.
Chair, yes, in terms of the parking, obviously this is a major proposal for the City of Cambridge, and it's something that the planners will take into account both in terms of traffic, highways and the environmental benefits. So it is a proposal, but it will be discussed with the planners and ultimately be their decision as to the appropriate steps to take. So I believe in terms of the City Council's planning policies, there is an intention to reduce car use within the area, but I appreciate there are potential knock-on effects. But we will engage with the planners on that.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the knock-on effects that I have concerned about. But thank you, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Mark. Richard, I think, is next.
Thank you, and thank you again for your understanding about my temporary absence earlier. I read this report with deep sadness, in truth. I thank the officers for the close attentions they've given to the new joint administration in reviewing the position. But it does seem, as it did on the day we signed the joint agreement at Shire Hall, and we arrived to find that the building was mothballed, they found difficulty finding the key, and it was frankly looking like the Mary Celeste. It's been left to such neglect that very, very sadly, it's prohibitive in order for us to make that an economically viable building vis-à-vis the alternatives. And I really regret to say that. I think I and many of us believe that the former administration took a decision that was motivated or failed to be motivated by the role of Cambridge as a historic city within the county and the heritage of the site, and the heritage in public rather than in private use. And in principle, I still absolutely oppose this decision. I do think that the questions that have been put to us about public access are fair questions. I wouldn't use the same language, frankly, about the report, which has been provided with us fairly and properly by our officers. But I think the challenge to us about maintaining public access is proper. I'm sure it has been heard and will be acted upon. And of course, the National Heritage Act 2002 is on the statute book, and I'm sure the County Council will take full cognizance of the points that were made to us in relation to it. I just look at that building and it reminds me of County Hall in central London, and a previous Conservative administration got rid of a great public body from that building and turned it into a hotel, and here we find ourselves doing the very same thing. We've been delivered a fait accompli by the former county council, but I regret it, and it's important to say it was their decision, not ours. Two more technical points in relation to the report. Firstly, I think there are proper points made about energy usage in the building and its environmental impact, although what genuine alternatives were thought about 2 years ago, one can only speculate. But when the report says public transport access to Alconbury Weald is more restricted than expected at the time of the location was expected, I don't know what wonderful public transport was available to Alconbury Weald 2 years ago that isn't available today. And I'll be really interested to know, because my colleague, the Vice Chair of Adults and Health Committee, Susan van der Ven, looked it up, and it would take her 8.5 hours to go from her home to Alconbury Weald. And this is a huge problem with respect to Alconbury Weald, despite, of course, the issues about meeting in other venues around the county, which I think provides the best alternative. And the other point that I'm grateful for, the leader and the deputy leader with the chief financial officer have reviewed the split between the capital receipt and the rental payments, and have decided, or the recommendation is, and we will decide, that there will be a different split under this administration. There will be more certainty, not based on projections of capital markets in years to come, but a direct revenue improvement as far as this authority is concerned, starting from now, year by year, which we can put into services. And I think that's a much more responsible and moderate approach to dealing with this. Was something that was within our power to do, and I congratulate them for doing that. Despite that, it is with sadness that I will be forced to vote for this report.
Thank you for that, Richard. I've got Chris next, and then Josh, and then Lorna, I think.
Thank you, Lucy. First of all, I'm not in favour of opposition for the sake of opposition. So I'd like to place on record that I appreciate that this paper is intended so that we can reach an agreed commercial position. And within that context, I detect no hubris, no arrogance, and no legal deficit from our officers. I have two questions, one of which is very short at the end, and one which might take a few supplementaries, I'm afraid. And the first one, the more important one, is to do with the financial calculations and the summary of financial projections on pages 124, 125, and goes on to 126. That's paragraphs 8.6 through to 9.5. May I first of all ask a very simple question? Am I correct in thinking that in the two summaries of financial projections which we see, that a discount rate of 5% has been used in calculating the net present value?
That's correct.
Okay, I'll come back to that in a short period of time. I was absolutely astonished to read the comment in paragraph 9.5, which states that 50% is, quote, the marginally optimum option based in absolute cash terms. Absolute cash terms have absolutely nothing at all to do with rational decision-making in this particular case, given that you are adding up pounds which are worth £1 today with pounds which have net present value of 12.8 pence today coming from 2061. So the absolute cash position seems to me to be completely irrelevant. And without going back, arguing the point about which option is better, which I'll come to in a second, I think that making a recommendation to us based on absolute cash terms is grossly misleading and really unhelpful. That's my first point. Do you want me to make one or two more, Lucy, or to let the officer respond?
I'm happy for you to carry on, and
okay,
then he can respond
so that's the first point.
Block.
Putting that to one side, I would challenge why 5% has been used as the discount rate for the net present value calculation. It seemed to me to be rather high. I'm aware that there has been a 5% involved in this whole calculation and the whole scheme before, which is now redundant. But I am puzzled, first of all, what the justification for a 5% discount rate is, and secondly, the extent to which any sensitivity analysis has been done on that 5% figure, because it is very important. I note the proposal to reduce the council guarantee of rent to the funder from 61.5% to 50%. I note also in paragraph 9.5 that 45% is mentioned when looking at the absolute cost terms, but we didn't get that calculation in the much more important net present value terms, which I found unfortunate. And I look at the decreases which there are and the amount of difference in net present value between the two. And it strikes me that the assumptions that we make, particularly the assumptions to discount rate, could significantly alter that. But then I go back to the Public Works Loan Board change, which really drives the change that we are talking about, it seems to me. So even if we were to end up at the 50% option with a lower net present value, depending upon the way in which it's calculated, it seems to me as though we have very little choice but to go down that route. Because the greater flexibility which is being shown between capital and revenue on the split, I believe personally, has more advantages to us than disadvantages, regardless of what the final number says, as long as it's not massively out. So those are my initial questions, if I may, to the officer about the way in which the numbers have been presented to us.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. I think the point I arrive at a similar place to you, really, because both in absolute cash terms and the MPV figures you see before us, actually the results are all quite close to each other. So you then do reach a more qualitative judgment, I guess, on the reasons for taking additional flexibility through the rental return. And that's my primary reason in recommending it too. We had to make a decision about which financial information to include in the report, and there is more in the confidential appendix, kind of comparing the two approaches. This project has been assessed in recent months against a 5% discounted cash flow. Excuse me, and does have a considerable sensitivity analysis sitting behind it as well, which I'm happy to share with members of the committee. And beyond that, I'm afraid I can't add too much more on that point.
I'm grateful, Lucy, for the offer to share that data, and I would very much appreciate that. I'm sure other members of the committee would find it interesting as well. And I note that no defence has been made in using absolute cash terms to define which is the marginally optimum position, because I don't believe that can be justified in 9.5, regardless of the fact that I think the recommendation that we've got in front of us is the correct one based on the information that I've got in front of us. But I just don't like seeing justifications being put forward which have no business validity at all in terms of the way in which they're given to us. I had a second question which is much shorter and maybe just as interesting. That is on page 122, paragraph 7.6.3. And I'm very interested to see the significant revision to the scheme, which will produce some potentially extremely interesting archaeological results. And I can only imagine how interesting those archaeological results are going to be. But what I fail to understand is who is taking the archaeological risk in the contract, given that the revised scheme does have significantly greater archaeological impacts than that originally submitted.
I think that might be a question for Tony. But if it isn't...
Well, we did raise this point with Pinsent Masons, who are one of the leading legal firms advising local government, of the legal advisors for this project, and we raised this because it came up in the briefing as well. The archaeological risk does sit with the developer, along with all of the other construction risks.
I'm delighted to hear that, Lucy. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I had Josh next.
Thank you, Lucy. Lucy, it was a request, really, based on Joss's comments, and the comments from Councillor Hewitt, City Councillor Scott, in that she's been very consistent as a previous county councillor in her persistence in trying to ensure the public access to the green space, and I commend her and her fellow colleagues for that persistence, because it is an important issue. And so in the interest of trying to accommodate that, this is a slightly disagree respectfully with Councillor Hewitt. This is not a fait accompli, because we're being asked to consider the commercial agreement and make that commercial agreement today. So I'd like to suggest an amendment to the recommendations an additional recommendation, which is that we look to place a legal covenant on the green space in which we would then maintain public access and enjoyment. And so we asked officers to go away and work that legal covenant up and include that in the commercial negotiations, so that could be included in the final contract. Thank you, Chair.
Are you saying you have already asked for that, or you would like to ask for that to be done?
I'd like that recommendation to be put to the committee.
Okay, I have reservations about putting that recommendation in at this point. I'm happy to ask for the work to be done, but I have some concerns about putting it into this report, because I think that this report is a final decision, and if the request for that had any impact on the overall business case, I think that would be a serious concern. So I'm happy to take that away as an action, but I would have reservations about putting it in as an amendment to the report.
So, Lucy, surely any member of this committee has the right to put forward an amendment, and if it is seconded, for it then to be debated. And the fact that you may feel uncomfortable about it shouldn't really affect the fact that a member has the right to do so.
I wasn't suggesting that. I was making an offer to take it away as an action. I absolutely recommend that Josh has the right to put
It's
that.
a really kind offer, but actually, no, I would like to put it to the committee that we do proceed with that, because obviously there is a passion within even members of this committee to include that. So I would like that to be included as a recommendation that we would put a legal covenant on the green space.
Okay, in which case I'm going to come back to Tom for a response on that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just really to agree with you, Chair, that is something that is difficult to fully consider the implications of on the spot. So I have reservations as well, which I should advise the committee of. The town green application is being considered by Suffolk County Council, so that there is no conflict of interest. And then under the proposals, the County Council will be the owner, operator and manager of the green spaces in front, the Castle Mound and the lawn in front of it, in due course post redevelopment. So from that perspective, I wouldn't have thought it was necessary actually, but that's not to say we...
Sorry, with all due respect, Chair, I appreciate that, but you know, I'm fairly well versed in land law, and legal covenant is one of the only ways in legal terms to protect land, and so that's why I've requested it that way. I'd appreciate the Village Green application. That's a different issue. I've tabled the proposal. I'll look to see if I have a seconder, but I would like that to be considered by this committee.
Thank you, Josh. I've got, I think, Councillor Howitt, Richard, and then Sam.
Mine was actually a point of order, if I could come in. It was just, is it appropriate for members of the public to be passing notes to committee members? I can't see that in the Constitution anywhere, so just wanted to...
I think it would certainly be better if they didn't wander around. So
it's passing notes as well, because obviously
I think
we're not all.
There's no harm in passing communication. I mean, they've got mobile phones. They could have done it anyway. I'm not bothered about the communication, but I agree. Under the COVID thing, it's probably better if they don't walk around. Richard.
Yeah, can I give notice of an alternative amendment, please, which would be that this committee notes that the agreement includes binding ownership and access to the green space in the site concerned.
Sorry, Chair, a point of order. My amendment, that would negate my amendment. My amendment makes a clear request, which is that this council adopts a legal covenant to protect the public usage. That would negate my motion. That's not an amendment.
Okay, so Councillor Fuller.
Oh, done it. There we go. We got it in the end, Chairman. Just to say, I'm happy to second that amendment. I think we've clearly heard very passionate points put across by City Councillor Scutt today. And without being flippant, may I just say how much I've missed her contributions in the last couple of months to this council. And so I hope to see more of her at such meetings in the future. But I think this is a very important issue. As Councillor Schumann has quite clearly said, this is probably the only way to guarantee what we're trying to achieve with this site. And I do take the point around village green processes, but that shouldn't negate the ability of us to be able to make this proposal here today. They are quite separate, and I think we should be supporting such a thing.
Okay, I'm going to come to Councillor Bowden. I'm going to make a very short comment first that I'm very interested that the Conservative councillors are so keen at this point to put in a legal covenant when, having had control of this process up until this stage, they never felt it was necessary. However, Councillor Bowden, your point, please.
Thank you, Lucy. That's much appreciated. And you're entirely correct. It shouldn't be necessary to do this, because what is being suggested here by putting a legal covenant in is doing no more than the paper assures us is going to happen anyway. But that very fact means that the assurance which can be given to the general public will be greater, because a legal covenant does have real teeth. It really can be enforced. So there is no harm in us agreeing to have a legal covenant to give the teeth which are required in order to ensure that the promises and assurances which are given in this paper will actually be able to be enforced.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Sanderson next, and then I'd actually quite like to come back to ask Tom whether putting the legal covenant in would have any implications for the business process that is underway. Tom.
Thank you, Lucy. Just to clarify, when Councillor Schumann says a legal covenant, you mean a restrictive covenant on the land? I believe that's the term. And we have anybody from legal that can just advise us on the correct form of words, perhaps? What sort of covenant are we looking at? What sort of act does it refer to?
Thank you. So I'm going to come to Tom next to ask for his view on whether this would have any implications. Then, sorry, Lorna, did you have your hand up? No.
I'll comment at the appropriate point.
Fine. Thank you.
Tony may want to comment on this as well. I think my concern is really that we are at quite an advanced stage of the negotiations with 3 or 4 other parties. I don't think there's any disagreement between anyone in substance that the green space should be protected and enhanced. My hesitation is that this would be a new issue or a new legal agreement to be introduced at a relatively late stage of those commercial negotiations, and that could have unintended consequences, I guess. So I don't know if Tony wants to add anything else on the actual terms.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Okay, so we have had an amendment put forward. We've been told that by Councillor Bowden, indeed, that this... I'm not sure whether it has a seconder yet. Does it? Oh, yes, Councillor Fuller has seconded it. Councillor Bowden has made clear that it doesn't actually change any of the things that we are expecting to come forward. However, our Chief Finance Officer is saying that it might be difficult for the financial, because the negotiations are at a late stage, and it would be therefore unhelpful to add a new covenant legal issue at this stage of negotiations, which I think is utterly fair, since the amendment doesn't actually change anything, and it might lead to difficulties with the discussions at the stage that they are. I think, prefer that we did not pass this amendment. So I'm happy to take it. We'll take a vote. That's fine. Lorna, do you have anything else to say on it?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I'm extremely concerned at the idea that we might be bounced into passing an amendment to put in place some new legal instrument when, with all due respect to Tom, who is very, very sure-footed on finance, I don't think Tom is a qualified lawyer, and we have not had legal advice here in order to guide us on this decision, and I feel very uncomfortable, and I would not be voting for such an amendment.
Okay, so we've had the amendment proposed and seconded. Councillor Schumann.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Lucy, as proposer. I think it's probably right that I just respond to some of those points. This amendment was purely in order to try and ratify the issues which have been highlighted, because despite, over the past 4 years, my continued commitment to maintain public access, which I reiterated, and I'm sure many of you remember, countless times, this issue hasn't gone away, Lucy and members. Obviously, that's why Councillor Scutt has addressed it again today. And this issue is not going to go away. And we are now at the final stage in which to address this issue. So whether it causes concern and angst or not, obviously this issue is not something which people are satisfied by our words, by our reports. We've been told that these reports are not based on good legal sounding, that they are, all of the comments that Councillor Scutt made, and I'm sure City Councillor Scutt made, and are on record about this report. So there is general angst and concern within the City of Cambridge about the public access. I'm simply trying to ratify that at this stage because we don't have another opportunity. This is our final opportunity. That's why I tabled this amendment. And if people are committed to public access of the Green and to continue that public access, then they will support this amendment because it's the only legal way in which to ensure it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schumann. And I have said at the outset of this discussion that I'm very happy to go away and look at that, but I don't think it's the right thing for us to put it into the recommendations at this stage of the process. And therefore, I don't think that we should be supporting this amendment. I'm very happy to go away and look at the issue, and I completely agree with you that you have said very clearly all the way through that there will be no risk to public access.
Chair, are you going to respond to every comment that members are making? Are you going to abuse your position as Chair? I think I had the right as the proposer.
This debate, and then we'll take a vote.
I had the right as the proposer to have the final comment, and yet you've just reiterated again your previous comments. I think I did have that right to make the comment and not have you respond to everything that's said.
Thank you. I would like to say that I have recognised your work on this, Josh, and that you have said at every point that there will be no restriction of access, but that I don't believe that now is the point that we should be putting in new legal requirements into this paper. So we're going to take a vote on this.
On a point of order, may I request a recorded vote on this, please, Lucy?
Yes, you can request a recorded vote. There's been a request for a recorded vote. We need 5 members to support a recorded vote. We have 5. Okay, so do I presumably hand over to you, Michelle, for the recorded vote?
Sorry, I'm having to do this all electronically, so you'll just need to give me a few seconds to get my list of members up. Okay. I will ask your name, and if you could please let me know how you wish to vote.
Could we just have a repeat of just what we're voting on, and also for the public? Thank you.
So the amendment, Philippa, is that we should include a new recommendation that there should be a legal covenant drafted to maintain public access.
Yeah. Okay. So on the amendment, if I read your name out, if you can please say how you wish to vote. Councillor Nessinger.
Against.
Councillor Moschini.
Against.
Councillor Bowden.
In favour.
Councillor Fuller.
For.
Councillor Criswell.
For.
Councillor Dupre.
Against.
Councillor Goldsack.
For.
Councillor Howell.
For.
Councillor Howitt.
Against.
Councillor Hoy.
For.
Councillor Wilson. Councillor Slatter.
Against.
Councillor Murphy. Councillor Sanderson. And Councillor Schumann.
For.
Chair, the result of the vote, I'll just check my maths is correct, yes. The result of the vote is 7 votes in favour of the amendment and 8 votes against. The amendment is therefore lost.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you. Is there anybody else who wants to speak? Richard.
Just I wish to put my alternative amendment, that having fallen. Do you want me to very quickly introduce it again? Yeah. First of all, I'll read it so that people can be very clear. There'll be a new F which says, notes that this includes binding arrangements for public ownership and access to the green space on the site. And if that's seconded, the reasoning behind it is I listened carefully to what Mr. Cooper said, and he gave us very clear assurances in that relation. And I just wonder whether what we've been listening to for the last 20 minutes or so is motivated genuinely by public access and ownership of the site, or whether it's just some political point scoring. And I wasn't in the past county council, so I don't criticise Councillor Schumann at all. But he and his group had 2 to 3 years to suggest a legal covenant if they were worried about this. And I just wonder why they're doing it now when they've lost the elections rather than before, when they have every opportunity to do so. And the real issue here is, does the green space on the site stay in our ownership, and do the public have access, a right of access to it? We've been given that assurance by our own officers. Let's just put that in the recommendations, and then there is no lack of clarity for the future.
Thank you, Richard. So we've had that amendment suggested. Is there a seconder for Richard's amendment? Thank you.
Happy to second.
Lorna, thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Schumann.
Thank you, Lucy. If I may recommend a slight amendment to that, through your words as Chair, which is that you would investigate whether a legal covenant could be placed on this, because that is the commitment which you made, Chair, a few moments ago. Obviously, my amendment lost, but you were willing to investigate whether a legal covenant could be placed on it. And I'm sure Councillor Hewitt would be really pleased that if that investigation could be carried out, Howitt, apologies, thank you, Councillor Dupre, Councillor Howard, because that is the kind of commitment that obviously the public do need. I reiterate my comments that I'm saddened that the new administration didn't see that this was a way to protect the green space and have voted against my amendment. However, if your words were genuine, Lucy, and that you are happy to investigate a legal covenant and whether that is possible, and if Brookgate's words are equally as genuine and they are happy that there will be maintained public access, this should be a moot point. We should be saying there's absolutely no reason why not. So let's ask our officers to go away, look to investigate whether a legal covenant can be put on as an addition to Councillor Howitt's recommendation, and I'd like to put that forward if Councillor Howitt's happy to accept that slight amendment.
I don't think it's possible to amend an amendment. I'm coming back to for advice on this.
Right. The Constitution says that you need to take amendments one at a time. So therefore, you need to focus on the amendment that's been moved by Councillor Howitt and seconded by Councillor Dupre. But for practicality reasons, there is nothing to stop another member asking whether the mover of the amendment is prepared to accept an alteration. Obviously, if Councillor Howitt refuses to accept that alteration, then I'm afraid that your amendment is no longer taken.
Thank you for that clarity. Then if I can just request, as I did in my speech, to Councillor Howitt. Thank you.
Just for speed, I don't accept it. I trust the integrity of the chair of this committee and the leader of the council, and I don't think anyone should question otherwise.
Thank you. So I think that resolves that issue. It will, however, doubtless be in the minutes, and therefore you can ask a question on it at the next meeting, Josh. Okay, so we have an amendment which has been seconded. Is there any debate on that amendment?
Sorry, Chair, can I, Councillor Howitt spoke it quite fast. Can I just check I've got your exact wording? And I've got an F. Note that this includes binding arrangements for public access to this site. Is that correct?
Note that this includes binding arrangements for public ownership and access to the green space on the site.
Sorry, Chair, as a point of order. Sorry, Chair. Lucy, as a point of order, I just need to clarify, perhaps, Michelle, we have anyone that could clarify legally whether that statement is indeed correct, because I'm not sure it is.
So I think, Tony, it's probably best to come back onto this, but with retaining the freehold of the whole site. So
Apologies, that's different to legal ownership in the terms of land law. That's very different.
I think if I may, Chair, in terms of the statement, there is a number of different ways that this could potentially be tackled in terms of restricted covenants or contractual obligations. It would require legal advice in terms of the precise nature, because as Tom points out, we will retain the freehold of it, but we will also subsequently be tenant of it and responsible for the management of it. So it would come down to the legal interpretation of the precise wording as to what that constitutes. And not being a lawyer, I'm not prepared to make a comment either way, although as I made clear in the answer, we do retain management control of the site and ownership of it.
Okay, we have an amendment that's been put forward. I'm happy to take a vote on that now, unless anybody else would like to take further debate on this. Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Lucy. I don't want to prolong this unnecessarily, but I fail to see how we can note something which is binding when we don't know how it can be binding and upon whom. And that lack of clarification means that this amendment is actually quite meaningless, because how can we note something which doesn't actually exist?
I've had the amendment. I'm going to take a vote on it. I note your concerns. We expressed concerns at the last one. Right. So let's, I don't think, is anybody going to ask? I don't think we need a recorded vote on this, so I imagine we can do this by show of hands. So if I can see all those in favour of Councillor Howitt's amendment. Good. Okay, and those against? Thank you very much. Okay, so I think we've now dealt with the amendments. Is there any more comment on the report as a whole? Elisa, yeah.
Can I just very quickly reiterate my utter astonishment that we've been pressuring the former administration to do this for about 3 years, and it only comes as basically a wrecking amendment to a paper that is far too advanced for that to be taken today. I am utterly, utterly astonished from people that actually should have the expertise to know what they're doing. And secondly, can I support the chair in the previous comment that she made at the beginning when this began? The issue raised by Councillor Schumann will be taken forward and investigated. Thank you.
Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Lucy. I absolutely support what Councillor Machini has just said. It is absolutely astonishing that, having been in control of this process for several years, the party opposite now feels it absolutely and urgently essential to fling in urgent amendments telling us that we have to do something that they had it in their power for several years to do. It is absolutely not to be taken seriously at all. However, having said that, I must say that while I share Councillor Howitt's sadness over what is happening, I must, with affection, disagree with part of the thrust of what he said in his earlier remarks, which is that I don't believe that retaining Shire Hall in Cambridge as the centre of government for Cambridgeshire is sustainable or was sustainable in environmental terms as well as financial terms. In environmental terms, in terms of the building and how the building could be brought to standard, but also in terms of encouraging large numbers of people to travel in, mostly by car, particularly from places like Wisbech, which don't have public transport connections worth talking about, into the centre of Cambridge, when Cambridge itself is crying out for less car travel into the centre of Cambridge. I think that for both of those environmental reasons, retaining Shire Hall as the centre of government was unsustainable, as well as the financial considerations of maintaining the building into the longer term. But that said, I have to say that Alconbury was a terrible choice. And we pointed that out at the time. There was a perfectly feasible alternative of North Stowe on the table, which does have good public transport links. And we chose to go to somewhere with absolutely no public transport, just at the point where the former mayor, having set up office there, had decided it was so unsustainable from all sorts of reasons that he was hightailing out of Alconbury as fast as he could. So we are where we are. We have a situation it is now too late to reverse and do anything sensible about. But that being said, we have to make the best of it. And making the best of it means getting the financial arrangements right, and this paper does that. And I would point out to Councillor Bowden, as I think he knows in his heart of hearts, that the argument about the financial arrangements is not just on a cash basis, but the point is made in that section about the net present value as well, which bears that out. Getting those financial arrangements right, protecting the access, use and enjoyment of the site and its heritage for residents, which we are absolutely adamant we are going to do, and also making the best arrangements for our staff about where and how they work into the future, and for public access to the new building at Alconbury. That's what we need now to focus on, making the best of the bad job that we have been left by the previous administration and doing our best with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. So just to say that I now have Councillor Bowden, Councillor Slatter, Councillor Schumann, Councillor Howell and Councillor Fuller. So Councillor Bowden, you're next.
Thank you, Lucy. I completely share and agree with Councillor Dupre's comments that it is a good thing that we are moving our CCC headquarters out of Cambridge City for all the reasons that she said. She's entirely correct. She's not correct to say that I made the statement that the only recommendation in favour of the 50% option was the so-called marginal optimum option on an absolute cash basis. The point I made that that argument was an entirely fallacious one, and that we needed to rely not on what is in paragraph 9.5, but on the net present value figures which are shown in paragraphs 8.6 and 8.7. However, I also said that even if those figures had been negative, even if those figures had been adverse, it still would have been advantageous to us
Point of personal explanation. I pointed out that the net present value was in 9.5, as indeed it is.
Yes, absolutely correct. I'm quite pleased, to be honest, that Councillor Dupre has highlighted the significant difference between a decision made based on net present value as opposed to a decision which is made on an absolute cost basis. However, I did say and did amplify that even if the answer on a net present value basis had been marginally negative, the PWLB requirements made it justifiable to go with the option which is being presented in this report. Now, the figures in this report don't say that it's marginally negative, they say it's marginally positive. Now, whether those figures would change if we used a discount rate other than 5% is an interesting theoretical question, but it wouldn't change, in my opinion, the final decision that we should make, which is to support the recommendations which are in this report so far as the agreed commercial position is concerned. But as far as the comments from Councillor Machini is concerned, saying that it was a wrecking amendment, well, assurances have been given by Councillor Schumann in his previous role within this authority and are now being given by the new administration so far as public access is concerned. Those assurances have been made both from the Conservative side and from the new Lib Dem administration side. Those assurances have been made, I'm quite confident, in good faith and are completely meant. What is quite astonishing is that your administration, Lucy, is not willing to give legal weight to those assurances when they are still not believed, quite clearly, by a significant proportion of the population in Cambridge. And given that what was being suggested was going no further than the assurances already given, I'm quite astonished that you didn't feel confident enough to seek to give those assurances some legal weight. Thank you.
Philippa.
Just a small part after all this weighty debate. I've learnt from experience it's a good idea to point out the obvious. We will have a certain amount of car usage coming in and out of the site. Can we be sure that there will be electric charging points, please? It does seem that some developers aren't prepared to do anything isn't written down.
Thank you. Tony, are you able to respond to that?
Yes, I'll need to check the details, but I'm pretty much certain there are electric charging points and that will form part of the BREEAM Excellent for the hotel. But I can confirm that for you.
Thank you. An admirably concrete point. Thank you very much, Philippa. Councillor Schumann.
Thank you, Lucy. And Councillor Bowden has stolen the thunder of lots of what I say, so I won't repeat too much of it. But just to say that, that the amendment that was recommended in a timely fashion, because you don't enter into legal covenants until contracts are drawn. That's what we're considering today. That's what this paper is requesting. You can say as much as you like, well, you had the chance to do it. We're not the ones signing the contract, and we weren't the ones who voted against a motion, or an amendment, which would have absolutely legally maintained public access. So all the virtue signalling in the world to say that we want to maintain public access to this green space is, quite frankly, nothing but words, because the motion or the amendment that I put to this committee today would have absolutely ensured that happened. And yet the only shocking or astonishing comments from the other councillors thing that I found that I'm sitting here considering today is that those members who shouted the loudest about it voted against that motion. And I think it's a real indictment of those people that represent the residents of Cambridge City that they failed to stick up to them when they had the opportunity to do so. It doesn't matter what happened before. This administration now will be the one that signs that contract without that legal covenant in place, and I hope the public remember it. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. Just very quickly, Chairman, I'm in agreement that we need to move the Shire Hall. It did need to be moved. It needed to be moved out of Cambridge. We were bringing traffic into Cambridge, and we need to stop that. I think the pandemic has done the job for us, but I mean, we need to do that as well. I think Alconbury is a good location. It's not as good as Camborne, but it is a good location. Oh, I seem to be beeping here, so I do apologise. It is a very good location, and I think it'll be enhance the area dramatically. And I think that's all to the good. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Fuller, Ryan.
Well, it was all going so well, Chairman. I found myself, for the first time, I think, possibly ever, nodding along with Councillor Dupre on her very valid comments around the sustainability of the future of Shire Hall. And, you know, it's regrettable, really, Councillor Howitt accusing several members on this side of playing politics when that's all I've heard him do all day, you know, saying all sorts of things about why we supposedly made this decision in the previous administration. It was actually made for very good reasons based on a strategic and financial business case, part of which Councillor Dupre and Councillor Howe have just vocalised around the madness, frankly, of bringing hundreds of people in cars into the city, into Shire Hall, on a daily basis, when the city, as we know, is overheating. And, you know, I'm afraid to say, I will be a bit political here because, you know, I'm following Councillor Howitt's lead on this. His colleague, the new Labour Mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, has scrapped the only mass transit proposal on the table that would have relieved some of that issue in Cambridge City. Now, without that, the situation is not going to get any better. And those people that understand anything around this know that buses are not the solution for Cambridge's transport problems. It's just not going to make a difference. So this is entirely the sensible decision to make. Where I had to stop nodding along with Councillor Dupre, I'm afraid, is when she made you know, quite a stinging attack on Alconbury. And as I note Councillor Sarneson's hand is up, so as the member for Alconbury Weald, I'm sure he's going to come to its defence. But just in case he doesn't, I would just highlight, you know, there's a good community of people there. There's some very good businesses that have chosen to base themselves there. And I think it does Councillor Dupre no favours at all. It does her no credit at all to keep launching such attacks on any part of our county, frankly. You know, I expect more of this Lib Dem administration, and its senior members should think twice before diminishing such places. Again, to go back to the previous point I've just made.
Chair, point of personal explanation again. That is clearly not what I said. The point was, and the point I made, was that for public transport reasons it was completely unsustainable as an option.
I was just getting to that point, Chairman. Again, we were due to have a metro stop at Alconbury Weald. That's what's changed. Again, the new Labour Mayor has scrapped that proposal. So Alconbury Weald will now find itself without any proposals for a mass transit system. It was also, of course, due to have a mainline train station. But again, under the Mayor's new proposals that seem to entirely focus on unsustainable bus networks, that's also in doubt. So I think the officers are right to draw attention to the changes that have happened to the public transport suggestions for Oldcombe Weald in the interim. And I would put all those changes at the door of the Labour Party, I'm afraid, because it's the new Labour Mayor, Councillor Howitt's colleague, who has affected those possible changes. So, you know, let's be honest when we make these comments, shall we? But this is something that has happened. We've made this decision. The previous administration has made this decision based, as I said, on a very strong case at the time to do so. And, you know, it's no point really in us keep arguing this over and over again and trying to rehash what's gone on before.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. I think this debate is getting quite a long way from the paper that's in front of us. So I'm going to come to Councillor Sanderson, who is, I think, the last on my list, and then I think we'll come to a vote. Councillor Sanderson. Tom, I think you need to have a mic because otherwise people outside the meeting can't hear.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm not really clear how Councillor Schuman's reached the conclusion the legal covenant, as he calls it, which I think he actually means a restrictive covenant, will give us an absolute guarantee this land will be protected. Do you have legal advice on that? We obviously don't have a lawyer in the room at the moment. So on what basis have you reached that conclusion? Because you haven't actually given any wording for this covenant. Could you clarify?
Can I suggest that thank you, Tom. I think we've covered the covenant. I think we've had quite a lengthy debate on this, and I think that actually I'd quite like to move to the vote now. I just want to conclude by saying that while I agree with Councillor Howitt, Richard, that we in an ideal world, I wouldn't be starting from here. This is where we are. We have a new building at Alconbury, which I hope will be every bit as good as Mark has suggested it's going to be. We need to make sure that the new development on Shire Hall is as good as it can possibly be and works really well for the people of Cambridgeshire. So whatever the process of getting here to where we are now, the really important thing for the future is to make sure that both of these new buildings work as well as they possibly can for the residents of Cambridgeshire, and that's what we will be committed to doing, and that's what I hope this paper is about. So while there has been a lot of debate, I haven't actually heard anybody oppose the paper that's in front of us. So if there is agreement on this paper, I think we'll take a vote on it, actually, just to be clear. So can I see all of those in favour of the recommendations on the paper before us raise their hands? Thank you. I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which I hope will be less contentious, but I'm not sure. This is item 8, independent living and the Princess of Wales development and the outline business case. So if I could ask the head of commissioning to introduce this paper. And that's Gerdov, I imagine. Thank you, Gerdov.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, committee. The report that you have in front of you is an outline business case which will lead to a final business case at a future date. I seek approval from the committee on the set of recommendations, and in particular, the first tranche of capital expenditure of £1.1 million to proceed with detailed design work. I also ask committee to note that the paper, or a form of this paper, has been to the Adults and Health Committee, who have approved the underlying service strategy. The report itself describes a new service, new capacity in the care market, and provides an opportunity for significant social and financial benefits. Looking deeper, it's about offering older people with higher levels of needs of a new way of retaining their independence by flexing and wrapping care services around their particular set of circumstances. The exact details is being worked up, which is where the detailed design work comes in, and we will do that through consultation. The report also signals to the care market, that what we're looking for older people is more tenancy-based homes for life that are self-contained and digitally enabled. And we wish to accelerate this approach, if agreed by committee, first in this particular district that the report refers to, and where prudent and appropriate further around the county. By way of assurance, this isn't a completely new service for the country. It's been done elsewhere in Kent and has been looked at in the West Midlands. What's also exciting about this particular piece of work is that we have the opportunity to do this collaboratively with the NHS, adjacent to a new hospital development in amongst a new major housing development in North Ely. The NHS themselves are at a very similar stage in their journey, which is an outline business case. And the report talks about how our two pieces of work are linked, particularly during this next phase. What I would add is that East Cambridgeshire District Council have granted the NHS planning permission for their scheme. Travel planning in particular was a feature and one of the many reports submitted as part of that. And we have studied these reports and we should be building on those for our particular planning application, which is much later than where the NHS are. The implementation structure proposes that we take direct control of the financing and the building of the project, and that we outsource the care and housing elements. This is because both the care and housing are very regulated marketplaces, and we need that expertise and capacity to assure the best possible outcomes. By way of compensation of that, what we will put in place are some longer-term contracts which allows us to direct what exactly we require from the service provider and therefore have a far more flexible arrangement. The report also highlights many risks, and it's important to do so at the early stages of a programme. And as we work through from this business case into the final business case and beyond, we will work through those risks in order to mitigate them or transfer them as appropriate to the right party. Finally, the outline business case predicts the best combination is proposal 3 amongst the 3 proposals that have been submitted, as it meets all the strategic objectives we looked at, provides a cashable benefit, provides employment benefits, and provides environmental benefits. I commend the report to committee, and I would welcome questions and comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And local member Alison Whelan, who is unable to make the meeting today, has submitted a contribution to the meeting, which I'm going to ask the Democratic Services Manager to read out on her behalf, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Whelan says, thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. I apologise for not being able to be present today, but would like you to note my views on the independent living proposals for Ely. This is a project that I strongly support. The integration of care and health in this way should prove to offer many benefits, not least of which is the proximity to the planned new hospital. The low-carbon design and the wraparound care possibilities that will enhance people's lives are just 2 of the positive points that come from the plans. The growth in residents in East Cambridgeshire, combined with increasing number of older people requiring care, demonstrates a need for this facility. Despite the low-carbon design, it is a pity that only 5 EV charging points are proposed. The facility for all car parking spaces to access EV charging should be built into all designs going forward. However, even EV cars are not carbon neutral and currently have other environmental impacts that need to be avoided. As such, there needs to be much greater emphasis on both public transport and on accessible active travel. There is currently significant additional development going on where this development is proposed, and all forms of transport are lacking. Road junctions are unlikely to cope well with the increased volume of road traffic. The cycle routes suggested along Lynn Road are not suitable, particularly with the increased vehicular traffic. Local cycling groups have raised concerns about these routes. It would be relatively easy for improved accessible active travel routes to be developed from Kings Avenue, entering Heaton Drive at the Water Tower and continuing to the proposed location of the ILS, thus allowing cyclists, pedestrians and others of others of pedestrian-controlled vehicles to avoid the need for cars. The report before you highlights the proximity of a bus stop, but fails to mention that the bus service is 2 hourly and then for only a limited part of the day. The report, to its credit, does mention public transport network assessment work that is currently going on, but such assessment does not guarantee the improvements that are needed. In improving this expenditure, as I hope you will, I would urge you to take this opportunity to ensure improvements to the public transport network and also to the accessible active travel network. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm open to committee members for comments and questions on this. I've got councillors, so Chris, Richard, and then Philippa. Chris.
Thank you very much indeed, Lucy. I very much welcome this report, and I very strongly support, in principle, independent living schemes such as this. And have done so for a couple of years now since learning much more about them. And I'm very hopeful that this will not be a one-off within Cambridgeshire, but it will be, as has been previously suggested, replicated in other parts of Cambridgeshire as well. Having said that, I look at the outline business case, and I have to say that there are a few warning signs within the outline business case, and I think that it will be extremely helpful, as is being proposed, to move to the full business case stage to explore these warnings more carefully. Clearly, there are risks involved. There are risks involved in any programme of this nature, right? Quite clearly. And I see something which almost approximates to a sensitivity analysis in the analysis of the risks which we see in the paper before us. And I look forward to a more comprehensive sensitivity analysis of risk in the full business case, because I think it's extremely important that we understand the implications of the assumptions which are being made in this so far as the financial benefits are concerned. And I do note that the benefits which are quantified are split between social benefits and financial benefits. I fully understand what is being done, and I'm also aware of your administration's desire so far as the evaluation of social benefits as opposed to financial benefits is concerned. However, I would point out that in principle, if social benefits are given equal weight to financial benefits, we could find ourselves approving scheme after scheme after scheme which have a net positive benefit, even if that positive benefit is overwhelmingly social, and we could find that on the financial side we end up with a council facing bankruptcy. So it's really quite important not to disregard the financial benefits or disbenefits of a scheme just because it also has social benefits. Having said all of that, I'll reiterate, I'm a very strong supporter of this type of scheme in principle. I very much hope that the numbers will work out when we get to the full business case. But one thing which is important within all of this, both in terms of the numbers but also in terms of the detail, is having greater member involvement in what is being put forward, not merely for this particular site, but also for an ILS programme which I hope will end up being county-wide. And in paragraph 2.6.2 on page 145, mention is made of governance to do with the ILS programme. Now, we have had a wider members' reference group in existence for a number of years, which has been active, and in fact it was regarded as being so important, given the financial and care implications of all of this, that it used to have both the leader of the council and the leader of the Adults Committee, I believe, as members on it, together with various other interested members. And I was very disappointed when we had our recent meeting of the Adults and Health Committee that the chair of the committee expressed uncertainty about the purpose and future of that reference group, and no appointments were made to it. May I ask you, Lucy, as leader, to ensure that the reference group does continue, and may I also ask that you ensure that you play a part in it, together with the chair of the relevant Adults and Health Committee, because it is so important both for the welfare of many individuals and also for the finances of in the future so far as the adult service in this county is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Just on that final point, I can give you a very clear assurance that Richard and I will work very closely on making sure that this project is well managed, whether that's a member reference group or some other kind of group. I think that's being covered by the Health Committee, but I am very keen to be very much involved in this project. So I hope that's a reassurance. Right, Richard is next, in fact. Perfect.
Firstly, as Chair of the Adult and Health Committee, we did discuss this in detail and were very supportive of it. This is about accommodation for people with high care needs that enable them to live independently rather than going into residential care. We all know there's a shortfall of that type of accommodation in every part of the county. And it's great to see this scheme, which is enabling it to be bridged at least within the Ely area. And I hope we'll be dealing with more such schemes in the years ahead. I very much welcome the contribution of the local member in Ely that was read out to us by Michelle. I think local members must be fully consulted and influence such proposals. Our committee itself made the point that having a bus stop is not very useful unless there are some buses that actually stop at it. And so some very valid points were made there that I am sure will be listened to and responded to by the officers. As far as the point we've just heard about the reference group, obviously it was agreed by the Adults and Health Committee to defer that, not appoint to it, but to defer for further review. And I'm quite happy to talk with the opposition spokes and of course with the leader about that. But there's no intention to close that group, but to recognise whether its functions could be dealt with in different ways, and that decision should be dealt with in that spirit. Two more points. I really praise the fact that we're going to do what the report calls the make model. We're financing it and we're doing the development as a county. We're not sending it out to someone else to do. That clearly has its risks associated with it, but the figures stack up as far as the officer's concerned. And it'll be a test for us and our capacity to do it well. But if we do, then perhaps we can adopt it on other occasions as well. So I praise that aspect of this report. Whether we actually ultimately outsource care and housing, as Mr. Singh was talking to us about and is in the report, we've got some time to look at that. And I have asked the officers just to keep that under review as we approach something that will actually be in some due amount of time. Finally, on the points about the financial risk within this, it is complicated. We're buying a site from the NHS, then to rent some back to it, and so exactly how the figures stack down are complicated and important. But we do have this goodwill from the NHS, of course, because they're our partners, and that appears to be beneficial in this case. If this was the final decision today, I would be concerned. But what we've had presented to us by our officers is a report that has a lot of due diligence contained within it. The idea that there's any disregard of finance within this, I'm just befuddled to even hear that, I have to say. And to make the point, this is an outline business case, not a final business case. I'm sure all of the comments in this committee and in the Adults and Health Committee will be taken into account, and I'm absolutely confident that it is right in principle for us to back this going forward.
Thank you very much. Philippa is next.
Thank you. Yes, I also warmly welcome this scheme and would support it. Members will remember I flagged up my eye being caught by health and social care aspects of the domiciliary care reference in our action plans. My background myself, at one point I combined being a city councillor and chairman of the planning with being a community nurse and bowel care specialist. I used to look after people with subspinal injuries and degenerative diseases such as MS. So I've been at the sharp end of that, and I've only too often had to adapt my nursing, in that case care, to the accommodation available. It is a joy when you go into somewhere that has been properly retrofitted or even built fit for purpose. And the trouble is, as a politician, I also know that time after time after time, we will get planning applications that just failed in one respect to deliver that accessibility, perhaps because somebody hadn't pointed something out soon enough. So I would like the assurance of the officers that it was not just a matter of consultation, but actually right from the beginning, expert advice will be sought from people like the Papworth Trust, who have a tremendous amount of experience. I've made reference in Adults and Health to the Papworth Bungalow. I see no reference here to any provision for live-in carers. And yet they are often the key to a lifetime home, either as a permanent or a temporary arrangement. It's an area in which the family can sometimes see an older relative through a difficult time or recovery from illness and need to be on the spot. I was fortunate enough to be able to see my mother through to a good death in her own flat, largely because there was a spare bedroom and we could have a care agency in, or even I could go in. The daily care, sometimes through the night, can sometimes be done in a timetabled way in this wraparound care that is implied, but not always. You often need to be able to listen out for something and give care when there are problems. And this is what keeps people out of hospital. It certainly kept my mother out of hospital, and I made it as a matter of pride that for years I kept other people who were quite famous out of hospital. Now, this is key. In this document, which wasn't part of what we saw in A&H, it calls for a flat with accessible ensuite tower and shower room and kitchenette. Now that, to my mind, conjures up a fairly small unit. And I'm not convinced that that would be the sort of thing that somewhere like the Pupworth Trust would advise. So please, let's have consultation with the experts right from the beginning, and then run it past other places like when we have a disability consultative committee for all planning applications in City Council. We also have a very expert access officer whose services I would recommend to you. There are lots of experts about, more up to date than myself. Please, let's get it right from the beginning, so that when you get it to the members' reference, the detail's been dealt with, because that's often where the issues can lie for somebody successfully being kept in independent living. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa. Gurdev, are you able to respond on consulting with specialist groups? Another one on the way.
Thank you. So with consultation, the answer is absolutely yes. So we will do a wide-ranging amount of consultation. We've already started with tenant groups, including Health Watch, and there'll be others as well as the DAS is a member of a number of bodies which we'll have access to that we will also join in and consult with. With regards to live-in carer, if I can just add, housing with care is one of a number of types of care. The live-in carer type service fits in our domiciliary support, which prevents people from needing to leave their own homes in the first instance. So we would very much have that, and we do have that in place now. The equivalent in a housing with care is effectively care and support and supervision 24 hours a day. And that is driven by a social care care assessment, and the fact we have nursing on site would mean there's a nursing assessment as well. So we have the equivalent in this type of service. And if I may just add on the final point, we will cover off importantly the size of the units as well within that consultation.
Thank you very much. It's good to hear that that is all part of the future discussions to be had. So I've got Lorna, then I think Elisa? No? Lorna, Mark and Ryan.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm going to start, as others have started, by saying that I fully support the principles of this proposal, and I look forward to seeing it emerge, change, develop and come into being. I listened with interest to and share the concerns of the local member about the proposals in their travel and transport aspects. This is an incredibly busy site at the moment. There's not only this particular development, but there is the redevelopment of the hospital more generally. There is also on site a large number of homes that have lain empty for quite some time, which have now been refurbished and are being either sold or sold. And then there is also a further development planned on green spaces in between the sites, which is a contractual obligation between the council and the Ministry of Defence. And therefore there is a lot going on this site, and the site is going to be much bigger and much busier than it was before. It is therefore all the more important that this development is a good neighbour to existing residents on the very busy Lynn Road and the areas around, as well as those residents who are already on the larger site in terms of the many domestic properties that are already there and have been for some time. And being a good neighbour involves getting that transport right. It involves making it easy for people to get there by bus rather than on the car, and making sure there are sufficient buses. And I would hope that this body, this council, will be pressing that point very strongly with the combined authority, which is now the Public Transport Authority. It involves having decent provision in place for electric car charging, which will only grow into the future and needs to be considered now. It involves making proper arrangements for active travel to, out of and through the site, avoiding where possible using the very busy Lynn Road in order to do that, and also involves highways works to make sure that the highways arrangements are as fit as they can be for this purpose. So I share those concerns expressed by the local member, and I do hope that we will be ensuring that both we as an authority and those who are responsible elsewhere to keep that very much in mind. My third and final point is about the governance. I do agree that it's very important that members keep a close eye on this, and I think that Councillor Slatter's intervention was an absolutely classic example of members being able to bring bring professional knowledge and expertise to this and be asking those searching questions. So I do think it's important. However, the previous governance arrangements were a complete dog's breakfast. They were an insulting dog's breakfast. And it is absolutely right that we put in place arrangements for members to oversee this that are actually constitutionally decent, as well as being effective.
Thank you, Lorna. So I've got Mark H, then Ryan, then Mark G, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I have a number of questions to ask. Do you mind if I ask some questions? Thank you very much indeed. With regards to page 138, 1.9, you say that there's 80 flats there. Are they single, double occupancy? What's the ratio, please?
So all the flats are single occupancy flats, of which 16 will be, the space of 16 will be rent out to the NHS.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I know you make reference to that on page 149, 2.7.1, but I just wanted to check. Chairman, I am a little bit concerned about that because normally 10% of flats in these type of establishments are kept over for couples, and that would mean that one member of a couple could actually be in desperate need of this type of accommodation but could not access it because they're still in a partnership. So that's a concern I have there, but I will move on. With regards to page 139, 2.12, you say you've market tested it and you had the 30 care providers, housing providers, developers and investors. And you're saying you're doing other tests. Are you actually looking at potential customers and people who are using these facilities already?
The short answer is yes.
You are? Because you haven't mentioned that in the report at the moment.
No, that's because that started as the start of this phase.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. With regards to page 140, 2.3.1, and you say you outsource in provision for care and housing, which is excellent, and I think that's very, very good. Obviously, the governments local and national governments are a bit fickle, and in the past they've said that you can have separate joint and care provision, and sometimes you can't, and you've got to have the same person, and it goes back and forth. Has that been taken into consideration for the future for any, if any, financial modelling?
So the tenant in this type of service has the right to choose their care provider.
Right. Okay, that's fine, that's good, thank you. You've got a payback period of 23.9 years. That's very impressive, since normal payback period for any local authority building is 30 years. Is that, I'm not going to say that I'm going to be around in 23.9 years to check. There's certain other members here that might, but I won't be. Is that doable?
So that's been through our financial modelling, which we've done some sensitivity analysis. When we return back with the full business case, we'll revise that to see whether or not it's changed.
Okay, thank you very much. With regards to the allocation of properties, who actually will be making those allocations? Will it be the care provider, the housing, or will it be social services, the local authority? Because each one will have a different criteria, shall we say.
So the county council will retain 100% nomination rights to all those properties.
Okay.
But if I can just caveat that we are renting out part of that to the NHS, so they are outside of that because they won't be considered as rentable properties, it's rent as a unit.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I won't be long, Chairman. I've only got a few more left. With regards to the employment of 2 people with learning disabilities that you make reference to, which will be obviously, I'm assuming, for the care provider. That will be a criteria in their contract. You say it's 2 people on page 144, yet your financial modelling on page 160 is for 3 people with learning disabilities.
If they're 2 different numbers, I beg your pardon, it is 3.
It is 3. Thank you very much indeed. That's excellent. And just one more thing, with regards to your contract for the care provider, what type of ratio do you know you will be looking for nurse come, if any, nurse care on the actual premises?
So there'll be a registered nurse for each shift. There'll be associate nurses supporting the registered nurse. Between the registered nurse and the associate nurse, that's roughly 40% of the ratio of all staff. Okay, thank you. You say that you're going to do 80 to 100 staff you're going to have. That's a lot. So the 80 to 100 is over a 24-hour period a day. So they'll be on shifts because naturally the tenants will require care 24 hours a day.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much indeed. And just one more thing, a comment was made. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Singh. One more comment with regards to the Papworth Trust. I think I should declare an interest. I worked for the Papworth Trust for 19 years. With regards to the Papworth Trust, they are very good at design. However, they no longer provide the care service. So if you are going to approach them, please approach them for the design aspect and their expertise. I would highly recommend that. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Singh.
Thank you very much for your questions, Mark. Ryan is next.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start as well by saying I really do welcome this, and I've got a sort of more of a technical question, I suppose, in that one of the benefits of this is to separate out the housing and the social care costs in a sense, isn't it? So there's a financial saving to the county council in enabling those people to be able to claim part of these costs back in housing benefit. But is there a scenario where the rent charge, not necessarily just on this scheme, but if this model is replicated across the county, where the rent charged exceeds local housing allowance rates, and are we therefore potentially shunting costs to the district councils as the housing and benefits authorities to make up that gap? And if so, is that an unintended or an intended consequence, please?
So in preparing for the rent charge and the estimates we've put in the business case itself, we have consulted with the district councils. I have to say, the district council is not in a position to give us an absolute estimate because an estimate will only be given to the tenant on an actual application. What we've done then is worked with other housing providers, other services, and looked at what is current actual charges. The actual absolute level takes into account the fact that the tenants of this nature will have access to special accommodation rates, which are slightly higher than the local housing allowance.
Thank you very much. And finally, Mark Goldsack.
Thank you. Well, Mark 1 was at 1,000 feet. I'm at 30,000 feet. I'm going to keep it very simple. We've had a lot of discussions of local matters, the very busy Lynn Road, etc., etc. I use it. It is a busy road. There are ways around this. I totally agree we need local input. But that's not always best from the local member. It's just local input is needed. I also think that we do need the technical input. But I want to just come up to the 30,000 feet. This is a good idea for the county of Cambridgeshire, not just for East Cambs, not for Ely, etc. This is the start of a process. I think in Gurdev, what we've had today is an officer that's answered every question clearly, succinctly, and with absolute detailed knowledge. And I thank you, sir, for what you've done with that. I think we should be getting behind this and supporting it. The Transport Matter's absolutely right. We are not the local transport authority. We need to make that count and make it work. A bus stop without a bus, I'm not even going there. Let's make it work. But to come on with the local issue at this stage, this has been reported. What I would say, going back to Councillor Howard had said, there was a user group that was identified from the service committees, a representative from each. I do recall Councillors Harrison at the time and Councillor Wilson were a little bit perturbed about the makeup of that. From the committee that I was chairing at the time, we put forward a Labour representative because the Labour's representative had the best knowledge for us to deal with those situations. And Councillor Jones did a fabulous job. So I would recommend you get that back up, and maybe that's the place where you go and get some local information put in as well. Chair, as you've already said that you're going to be actively involved in that, I look forward to seeing the delivery of this suite with you at the helm. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That comes to the end of my list of speakers. So thank you for a good debate on this issue. I haven't heard anyone say anything other than positive things about the proposals broadly. I am very well aware that there are financial risks involved in this, and that I think we need to give really careful scrutiny to the full business case when it comes before us. But I think not just for this scheme and for the council's finances, but also because it's incredibly important that this scheme works financially so that we can have the justification to potentially bring forward more of these schemes, which I think we all hope are very successful. So having said that, I don't think anyone has indicated in any way that they want to oppose the paper before us today. So if we could just take a vote by show of hands, all those in favour, please indicate. You happy that's unanimous? Lovely, thank you. That's excellent. Good. Right, I'm hoping that we're now coming to the final item on the agenda, which is, oh no, it isn't quite the final item on the agenda. It's the Treasury Management Report. Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So just very briefly then, in introducing this report, we confirmed that the Council was in compliance with the prudential indicators as at the end of Q4. And we also refer to restructuring of borrowing and taking opportunities with PWLB to fix interest rates for longer periods at opportunities where they're attractive. I don't think I need to say anything further in introduction.
Thank you. Is there any debate on this item? Excellent. Oh, Chris, did you raise your hand?
No, Lucy, I was merely looking pensive.
At this stage, I think we're all quite pensive, if not hungry. Okay, no debate on that report, in which case we have noted the Treasury Management Report and we will forward it to full council. I don't think we need to vote on that one because it's been noted. And we will I hope, move forward to the last item on the agenda, which is the appointments to panels and the appointment of member champions, which I will hand over to the Democratic Services Manager to introduce the report. Michelle, I think there was a suggestion that we might change the number of two of these groups from 6 to 7. So I think if we could note that also, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I won't go into great detail on the report itself because I'll assume that everybody has read it, but I will focus on the appointments for the first two recommendations, which is in the appendices. And if I could quickly go through those, the appointments to outside bodies. The first one, the Cambridge Bid Board, it's proposed that Councillor Bird take that post. Cambridgeshire Horizons, it's Councillor Nessinger. The England's Economic Heartland should be the leader and deputy of the council. ESPO Management Committee, it's proposed that Councillor Goodliff be the appointee. We do need a second suggestion on that one, and there is a recommendation where these can be picked up at the spokes meetings if we don't get a recommendation at this meeting. And the ESPO Audit Subcommittee and the shareholder representative will be Councillor Goodliff on that. The Huntington Bid Board, that is suggested that it be Councillor Tom Sanderson. LGSS Law Limited, the suggestion is Councillor Edna Murphy. This Land Board of Directors is Councillor Neil Goff. And then we move on to the internal advisory groups and panels. The Civic Hub Project Board is Councillor Graham Wilson, and we again do need a second rep. The County Farms Working Group, it's proposed that it is Councillors Dupre, Gay and MacDonald, but there is a proposal to increase the numbers on there to 7 because that reflects proportionality. The same regarding the Member Development Panel, the need to reflect proportionality and include the independent group by increasing to 7. And the representatives on that one that we have so far are Councillors Criswell, Nesinger, Sanderson, Slatter, Smith and Miskini. So we are, I believe, just missing a Conservative appointment. So that's all as regards the appendices. And then the committee does need to look to appoint a County Farms member champion and an evidence-informed policy member champion. And I draw your attention to the last recommendation where there is the opportunity to delegate to to the chief executive so that these appointments can be done outside of this meeting, any that we have outstanding. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Michelle. That's extremely helpful. Are there any comments or are there any people who would like to put forward other proposals to any of those bodies at this point? Okay. Councillor Criswell and then Councillor Machine.
Just to say, I'll bring forward another member for the Member Development Panel if that's okay outside the meeting.
Thank you.
Can I just say we had an offer from Councillor Shaler to be the second ESPO person.
That's fine if he'd like to be that.
If that's okay, otherwise I don't think it's must, but
that's great.
It's okay to do that.
Thank you. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much for that clarity, Michelle, and we'll pick up those other spots after the meeting.
Sorry, Chair, do you want to just, do you also want to pick up the member champions as well outside of the meeting?
I'm happy to, unless anybody has any suggestions or recommendations at this point. Let's pick those up outside. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 11, which is the Strategy and Resources Committee Agenda Plan and Training Plan. Yes, Graham, sorry.
This one seems good. I just wanted to pick up on something which Mark G had mentioned earlier about getting the best people on some of these groups. That I'm slightly surprised that there are no Conservatives who have put themselves forward for them. Is there a reason for that?
I'm happy to pick that up. I mean, I agree. I think it would be very helpful to have some volunteers, but I'm happy for them to come forward after the meeting if they would prefer. Mark?
In the absence of hearing anybody nominated, if you'd like me to continue in the role as the County Farms champion, I'm happy to have that conversation.
Thank you. We'll have a conversation. That would be excellent. I mean, one of the things is that I think some of these things that you need to work closely with the group, but I'm perfectly happy to that. That sounds excellent. Josh?
In the same vein, Lucy, I'm happy to stay on this Land Board Directors for you if you'd like, because again, if Councillor Wilson's asking about experience, then I'm quite prepared too.
Thank you, Josh. I think we'll stick with our previous nomination on that one.
Great, and perhaps Councillor Wilson will note that and the reason why there is a pointless exercise in us elongating this process. Thank you.
Well, I'm delighted to hear from it, Josh. I was just conscious that there seemed to be a distinct lack of enthusiasm on some of the groups where we had vacancies. But I'm pleased that Mark
Obviously
G
not from me, through you, Chair. I've had very enthusiastically put myself forward.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I think at that point we'll move on to item 11 on the agenda, which is the strategy and the agenda plan and the training plan. So, Michelle, I think this is over to you again.
Thank you, Chair. The agenda plan as set out for the 21st of September is quite a full agenda. There's also another item that needs to be added, which is the business plan. We'll be coming to that one, and hopefully we will be having that meeting in our multifunction room at Alconbury, where all the equipment will work perfectly. And if I can hand over to Amanda to comment on the training plan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michelle. So we've picked up some items from various induction meetings that we've gone through and from chairs and vice chairs meetings. So I will circulate those and see if there are any other comments and things that people have asked for. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And I think we don't need to do item 12 because I think we've covered the items that might need to be moved into private session without needing to speak to the confidential papers. At which point I would first of all like to say thank you very much to you all for your patience in staying here until 2. Enormous thanks to Michelle for arranging the technology and her patience and the sound team in moving around. I hope very much that her confidence that everything is going to work perfectly at Alconbury is well placed and that we'll have an excellent meeting with no sound issues or other issues. Maybe even no COVID regulations. We'll see how we go in September. And thank you all again for your patience and your cooperation during this meeting. And I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for chairing so well today. Thank you.